This is a podcast about new crops. You're going to love it. Join us on The Cutting Edge, a podcast in search of new crops for Wisconsin.
We check the data, how much saffron we actually import to United States or we imported to United States. In 2019, we imported more than 70 tons. That means 70 million grams of saffron to United States.
Welcome to The Cutting Edge, a podcast in search of new crops for Wisconsin. I'm your co-host, Jerry Clark, with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension, serving as an agricultural agent in Chippewa County. And joining me as my co-host today is Evan Henthorn.
Yeah, so thanks, Jerry, so much for the invitation to be a part of this. I know I am super excited to learn about our product today, Saffron. Originally, when you sent me the invite, I had to do a little bit of research, but I'm excited to connect today with our presenters, Margaret and Arash and Jonathan, and really dive into learning how we can make this a more common product here in the great state of Wisconsin.
So welcome, Margaret, Arash, and John. I really appreciate you guys taking the time today to introduce us to this crop called Saffron. And again, Margaret and Arash are researchers at the University of Vermont, and John is local right here in Wisconsin, and we'll have them introduce themselves here in a minute. So yeah, finding out about saffron, and we're just going to give this a high-level view today as far as what it is and where it's found and how it grows and those kind of things. So I'll just turn, Margaret, you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Yes, I'm a research entomologist at the University of Vermont, and you might ask, why would someone who works on entomology be involved with saffron? And it all gets down to we're there to address the questions and issues that face growers in Vermont and beyond, and diversifying production is critical to the small farmers of Vermont. And so that's why we got involved.
Great. Arash?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for having us in your program. My name is Arash Behbahani, as I said, and I'm a research associate, especially work on the Saffron research project at the University of Vermont. And yeah, in this program, we are going to talk about, I will go to talk about the details of our project and saffron development, saffron production development in the United States.
Great. And John, you're a farmer from Wisconsin that we've connected with over the last couple of weeks setting this program up. So welcome, John.
Thank you. I'm enjoying the opportunity to be here. I appreciate Margaret and the team and Arash and Vermont. It's been great work. So thank you for inviting me to be part of this. I've enjoyed growing saffron, started in 2017, and I live in the Fox Cities area. Kimberly, and our small produce farm is in Greenville, which is just outside of the Fox, in the Fox Cities. So I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Great. And so, yeah, just talking to maybe Margaret quickly, what is this crop, and how does it grow between and Jonathan as well? You can chime in, but what is it? I guess saffron, we see it in stores, but what is it and how does it grow?
Arash, you want to start with that?
Sure. Saffron is well known as the most expensive spice in the world. But what is that technically or actually? Actually, saffron is dehydrated or dry stigmas of flowers of Crocus sativus. Crocus sativus is a fall blooming crocus. That means it produces flowers in fall. So when you pick up the flowers, separate the stigmas and dry them in the oven or whatever that you have, the product that you will have or you will get, we call it saffron.
Perfect. Thank you, Arash. So kind of moving along here, Margaret or Arash, do you want to like kind of give a little bit of background of how did you get into this? How did you get into saffron? What drove you there? Or, you know, was this a path that you knew, or was it like a left field kind of project that you just stumbled upon?
Well, Arash's wife was a graduate student here at our laboratory working on insect killing fungi, and he came to finish up his PhD and be with his wife. And he mentioned one day, geez, why don't you grow saffron here? And initially I thought, I don't think that would really work very well in Vermont because it's too darn cold. And I had tried growing saffron many years ago, and I had planted the corms in the fall, like they said, and then I waited for the spring for them to bloom because I didn't realize they were fall blooming. So if they bloomed, I never saw them. And so I assumed, based on my limited experience, that it would not grow well. But then when we started thinking about it more, we thought, well, everybody's, lots of people now are putting up high tunnels in Vermont, and they often grow tomatoes in the summertime and make a lot of money that way. And then they grow winter greens in the fall and winter. And they don't make very much money on those crops, that shoulder crop. And so we started thinking about it. And at that time, we assumed that saffron would not survive outside our cold winter conditions. And so that's why we started out with the idea of growing them in milk crates. And the theory was you could pick the milk crates up, take them outside in the springtime when you want to put the tomatoes in. That was our original premise. We've moved on from there, and we realize, in fact, that saffron grows quite well outside. And so a lot of our work now is more focused on field production. Though there are a lot of people that are still growing it in high tunnels or in greenhouses. Home gardeners seem to like using container grown options. But for the larger professional commercial producers, I think they're going to want to do it in the field.
Sure, sure. And maybe you mentioned this when you were doing a little introduction and I missed it, but can you just say again, how long have you been studying and working with saffron and handling it?
Well, in terms of the research, we started it in 2015.
Sure. So, I mean, it seems like it's not that long ago. So you're still pretty new to yourself. So you're continuously learning and growing with it as well. So, sure.
In fact, the one thing that kind of amazed us I think it was March 2017, we did a workshop. And we thought, oh, maybe we'll get 30 or 40 people. And we had over 100 people come, and that from all over the country to little old Vermont. And that's when we realized that this whole concept had great potential.
So Jonathan, as a producer, as a farmer, when did you connect with the University of Vermont and Margaret and Arash, or how did you get involved in Wisconsin after you figured? I mean, I think part of what I've realized is, yeah, Vermont's growing this, Wisconsin should be able to grow it. We're on the same latitude. So that's where I was coming from. But how did you get involved?
Yeah, so I had, my background, I grew up till I was 8 in Ukraine, and everyone grew food there, at least in the rural areas. So I came to the U.S. when I was 8. So food's always been, agriculture been part of my life and my roots. And then I was just doing some nonprofit work, and I learned about, just we need more growers, people producing local food. So my wife and I have been looking for some small farm land to purchase. And we were looking at different products. We did some, typical market farm veggies. And then I think it was in maybe 2017, I learned about saffron. And I think it was from Rumi. They're one of the largest local, or not Wisconsin, but national producers. They import product from Afghanistan, and it was started by military veterans. And I served in the military myself for over 12 years. And I thought, well, hey, if they can grow it in Afghanistan, I want to try to figure out if I can grow it in Wisconsin. So I did. And the biggest research that I was able to find was in Vermont, the saffron that Margaret mentioned. It's just such a wealth of resources. So I thought, well, maybe I'll try a little batch of, in 2017. So I did some of the milk crates. I had a little high tunnel, and I purchased about 200 corms, and then I planted those, harvested them, and kind of diversified how I grew them. And I had about just under 0.9 of a gram that I harvested of the stigmas that were dried. And then since then, in 2018, I went to the conference in Vermont, learned a lot there from people. And then I purchased 2,500 corms from Morocco Saffron. And then I harvested about, let's see here, just under 8 grams. And then every year ever since then, I've been kind of learning and adapting and seeing what works, what doesn't work. And we've been field growing them in our farm, Breadbasket Farm in Greenville, Wisconsin. So that's kind of been my background in starting it. And I just wanted to add it as a value added item and something that's grown locally. I believe it's important, the kind of food we're eating. And I think it'd be nice to also know, like, hey, you can get this locally too. And as trying to do it in a way where it offers sustainable wage, but also a quality local product. And Wisconsin loves producing homegrown things too. So I just wanted to be a part of that as well and learn.
Yeah, awesome. So I think kind of with growing anything or raising any sort of a product, right, there's challenges or there's struggles. So Jonathan, could you just keep that conversation going? Like, what was a struggle or a challenge that you kind of faced with growing this saffron crop? Because 2017, I mean, that was only 3 years ago as we just started into 2021. So what kind of challenges did you encounter?
I think there's a few different challenges. First is like, well, I asked some of my friends that were organic farmers. We did a nonprofit urban farm. We collaborated on projects together, and I asked them, and they've never grown it. They didn't know of anyone else locally that was growing it. So I thought, well, what am I doing? What am I thinking? But I like a challenge, and I also, I think for me is like just the name, like you're pulling the stigma out of the flower. Like I just love the symbolism within it and the beauty it offers, and the pollinators with the bees. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to work through this. And some of the original challenges was we had a raised bed and we had rabbits. They just came and devoured, like had this nice foliage. This is after I harvested the flowers and then picked the stigmas out, but they devoured the foliage and it just pretty much put them off. It really set them back. And then I had some other ones that were in crates, and I had those in a high tunnel, a small one, and they end up freezing in the weather. I didn't insulate them very well. And I had they all essentially rotted the next year. They didn't do well. They didn't grow. So that was the first year. And then I went to this conference and I kind of learned from other people in Vermont and, you know, from all over the country. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to grow outdoors, just like how other people are doing it in all over the Middle East and different climates. So then at that point, we had bought our small produce farm just under 4 acres. So we planted them, and we did decent, but weed control is an issue. And then also we had some deer damage initially a little bit, and then just some rodents and some wetness in the fields. But generally, it's been a low maintenance crop other than the weeds and getting under, you know, ahead of them. So then the crop can grow and multiply and the corms can develop. And then, you know, the year after, have a good harvest, ideally.
You know, one thing after our first workshop, I think a lot of people were interested because we were talking about how you could make maybe, I don't know, $100,000 from an acre of saffron, which I think people saw dollar signs. And they thought, oh, okay, I'm going to start a large operation of saffron. And from the very beginning, and even now, we encourage growers who are saying, I want to try growing saffron, like Jonathan, don't start with 100,000 corms. Start small. See
Exactly.
if it's not, even though it's a low maintenance crop, there's a two or 3 week period when it is very labor intensive. And so you got to be ready for that. You got to be ready to bend over a little bit. And so we have always encouraged any new emerging saffron grower to start small. And I'm so happy that we did, even though it's not good for business, or it's, you know, the funding agencies, they like to see large acreages of everything. And In Vermont, there were big problems with hemp production. Everybody started growing hemp. They stopped growing corn and they started growing hemp, and they lost gobs of money. And I am so happy that we encouraged growers to be conservative with production initially, because just like Jonathan said, there are little tweaks, there's different things you got to learn how to do to make it work. And if you do it on a full acre, you are going to lose money. And so you start small, you figure out what works for your situation, and then you move forward and scale up. Just like Jonathan's doing it. You're doing it just right, Jonathan.
Yep, he's from Wisconsin. We always do things.
Oh, no. But you learned from Vermonters.
I did.
So along those lines then, Margaret and Arash, so you've got this crop that has market potential. I think we see that you gave a great example of hemp. Everybody dove in, the market crashed, those kind of things. But kind of along the lines of the production side of it, where do you get corms? How much does that cost? Can you give us just a real high level cost of production or market synopsis of where this crop might go in the future, or somewhere along those lines of the marketing and cost of production side?
Okay, let me answer this question. It's a very good question. But before I answer this question, I want to mention one important thing. This project is pretty much new. It started in 2015, saffron production research, but saffron has a deeper root in United States. 300 years ago, some people, Amish and Mennonite families, they brought saffron corms or saffron bulbs, technically are corms, to some part of United States, especially Pennsylvania. And saffron, as I mentioned, has a deeper root than these 5 years. So about the marketing, we actually get the saffron corns from, at this moment, we get the saffron corns from Netherlands for doing the research, and most of the growers that we already have here, they got their saffron corns from Rocco Saffron or other Dutch companies in Netherlands. So about the market, there is a potential for saffron market here in United States. One way we started to answer this question, where we consume saffron, was like, we checked the data, how much saffron we actually import to United States, or we imported to United States. And the data, the most recent data from UN Trade Center showed in 2019, we imported more than 70 tons. That means 70 million grams of saffron to United States. So there is a market here. There is potential here. And we hope that saffron growers, local growers, step up and find those markets and start to work on it.
Just to give you a sense of what the potential value is, if you go to a health food store, you might be able to buy it for $20 a gram, maybe, give or take. No way of knowing where it came from, who picked it, anything. It might say it's from Spain, but there's really no way of knowing whether it came from Spain or Afghanistan or anywhere else. It's a very murky thing. In Vermont now, growers, and we're still talking about small areas of production, people are selling it for between $25 to $50 a gram now. So Arash, how much is that a pound, if you're talking about a pound?
It's around $9,000 to $22,000
For a
per pound. Yeah.
Holy smokes. And
it's more than gold, for sure.
Right, for sure, that's gross, not net. And admittedly, the time it takes right now to pick it and to separate it and dry it, that all takes time, for sure. But sometimes people say, oh, saffron, it's so labor intensive. it's not worth it. And I have contended for a long time that if you grow high tunnel tomatoes, you start growing those in April or May, you put them in the ground, then you need to prune them and do a lot of pest management, and then you finally get around to picking them, and you do it all summer long, a little bit all summer long. This crop is very similar to maple syrup, I'd have to say. It is very intensive at a period of time when a lot of growers are finished their field production. If maple syrup had to be produced in June and July, it would never have taken off. The reason it works is because growers can't get on the field in February and March and April. Same thing with production of saffron. It's a beautiful shoulder crop. And yes, intensive at that one period of time, but then it's over, especially if you get the weed management under control,
Yeah.
which we're figuring out ways of dealing with that.
Don't forget, we need workers for just 2 or 3 weeks in fall. So it's labor intensive, but we are just talking about 3 weeks in fall. And saffron is a perennial crop. You can keep it for 2, 3, 4, 5 years in the ground. So you don't need to replant the beds every year.
So we're dealing with a perennial here, correct? I mean,
That's right.
plant it once, it's going to come back. And so, Jonathan, is that kind of how you've? I mean, from the labor, we kind of talked about labor and that investment and that kind of thing. And you've got a couple thousand corms, I think, is what you said. So how does that, straight from a farmer? How's the management of that come harvest time? And Margaret brought up weed management, those kind of things.
Yeah, so I think for, like Arash and Margaret said, it's very labor intensive during that period. And like, I'm going to use this year as a reference. In this past year, 2020, we had a lot of growth. It kind of starts slower and then it ramps up and then it's done. So basically for us, it was about the first week of October. And then by the first week in November, we were done. We might have a few stragglers that were growing afterwards or slightly before, if you notice them in time. So pretty much every day or every other day, you're harvesting and picking the purple flower as much intact as possible. And then you're taking that with you, and then you're separating the purple flowers, the stamen, that's the yellow part, and then the stigma, which is what the spice is from. And then you're drying that. So we use a dehydrator, small dehydrator, and it's a very tedious process, but really dialing in those processes and learning along the way has been helpful for us to kind of minimize the deficiencies and learning just tricks, I guess, but also really just good practices. And for us, we intend to be organic certified, so we've been following those practices for the last few years. So we don't use any herbicide or pesticide. We've been just trying to do it naturally. And part of that is you start, with good soil, with good management. We do like a 30-inch bed system for small market gardeners. It's a pretty standard size. And then we do 5 rows every 6 inches apart. So similar to garlic, as far as spacing, we actually mirrored how we planted the garlic, because we also grow garlic in the former spot where garlic was. And we've been growing in that same spot since. But yeah, there's a lot of challenges, especially when the weeds and grasses are growing. And ideally in the summer and spring, you want the foliage to keep growing, because that's what's going to allow it to photosynthesize and let those corms, those mother corm, or the daughter corms from the mother corm expand. So if you're not getting good foliar growth, you're not going to have probably a good harvest, or even maybe any corms left in the next year. You have to also make sure that you're not neglecting it through the season. Otherwise, your corms will be gone.
Yeah. And Jonathan, I just want to follow up. So what kind of size of an operation in the terms of workforce do you have? Is it just you? And I think you mentioned your wife, or do you hire a couple of people for just that kind of fall time? Or, can you elaborate a little bit more on that kind of?
Yeah. So we're a very small market farm, and I don't do this, the farm yet, as a full-time operation, because we live in a different spot than our farmland is. So I do some nonprofit work and then some technology work. But ideally, we want to be living on our farmland because we have chickens and ducks. It's a lot of work to go back and forth and things. So, but we wanted this as, like Margaret said, a shoulder crop in the end of the year. So our land that we actually grow the saffron, it's a very small spot. It's a bed of about 25 by 50 feet, and then we don't even have all that planted. And that's where we have our beds, 30-inch beds and about 18 inches in between. So it's just very small. We don't hire anyone. My wife, Mara, and my partner, Bread Basket Farm, and our 6.5-year-old son, Micah, we harvest them together. It's a fun thing to do at the end of the year when everything else is kind of dying, and just like look at the old tomatoes and it's like, oh man, we have to go clean those up. It's a beautiful addition to have because you have some pretty flowers, and then the bees, they love them too. They go and pollinate, they get ready for winter themselves. So yeah, at this point, we want to start small and as a complementary crop. And we've really just been researching at this point, researching and process improvement until we learn.
Picking flowers with your family. Now that doesn't sound too darn bad. So that sounds like a great option.
It's fun.
You might ask, who's growing saffron anyway in the United States? And we don't have a total handle on the situation. One reason is it's still such an emerging crop that the USDA doesn't collect data on that kind of thing. But probably there are a lot of home gardeners that are growing relatively small amounts, kind of like what I wanted to do back before I knew what it was. And then there are a lot of part-time farmers like Jonathan. And maybe 15% of the people that we are interacting with are actually commercial saffron growers that have fairly large acreages, or not, probably maybe an acre, probably generally less than an acre. But the amazing thing is all the different kinds of people that have contacted us that are interested in growing it. And one of the common things is people who maybe are not living in Vermont. So a lot of people maybe have land here and that has been out of production, and they want to come back when they retire and have something to do. And geez, Vermont is the most beautiful place in the world in October, November. Who wants to be anywhere else? So you just stay home and you harvest the saffron and make a lot of money that way. So there's lots of different kinds of people. We also get calls from people from the Midwest who are not making a go of it with their field crops, and they're looking for a different kind of crop to take over from corn or soybeans, et cetera, et cetera. Again, it's all about diversification.
Yeah, and that's part of why we started this alternative podcast series, was to introduce to Wisconsin growers and landowners, and that there's some alternatives out there. And I think with Arash, with saffron, then is that what kind of yields do you, I mean, we guys talking yields, and we're talking grams here. I mean, is it so many grams per flower? And maybe Jonathan can pipe in too, but how does the actual, we get the production, we plant it in the spring, get some product, are we going to get a flower that first fall, or, kind of explain that process along with, how do we know we got to pick the flower, but then, what's our yield? What do we expect? That kind of thing.
Sure. Saffron, as other people mentioned, has a special life cycle. Is a fall blooming crocus. Actually, to produce saffron, you have to plant saffron corms in September, August, and September. And then in 40, 50 days, you will see the flowers. So very soon. In mid-October to mid-November is the blooming season, is the blooming time, is the time that you should harvest the flowers. Usually somewhere between 150 to 200 flowers produce a gram saffron for us. So we harvest the saffron flowers, then the green leaves will come up. All over the winter, we will have the green leaves. And in the summer, when the weather gets warmer, the plants go to the sleep, that we call it dormancy. That means we don't have any green leaves over the summer on the ground, but we have dormant corms under the ground. And they are responsible to, or they will be responsible to produce saffron flowers for in the next fall for us. It is the life cycle of saffron. So about the yield, initially we were talking about, can we just produce saffron? Can saffron corms survive in this climate, cold climate? After 5 years trial, I should say the answer of that question is absolutely yes. And the yield was really promising. That was amazing. In one of those research plots that I planted this year, I harvested equal to 17 pounds per acre. It's like 3, 4, 5 times more than average of the yield average in other saffron producing regions. So that means the yield here is awesome. Why? Because of the soil, because of the climate. And don't forget, we are rely on rain-fed system. We don't even put water on the plants here in this climate. So yeah, it is the story about the yield here.
Yeah, and Jerome, I had this year we counted because trying to get the data is really important to see how we can improve, and we harvested just under 1,500 flowers. So that's a lot of counting, you know. So we always every day when we harvested, we pick them, you know, count them as we go, and just make sure we don't mess up our counts. Otherwise, we recount it. But we ended up having about 9 grams of dried saffron thread. But there's people, how do you get those 9 grams? So there's different schools of thought of, you know, what part do you include? We've just been doing the entire stigma so that they don't separate as much. But maybe the purists will say you got to clip any part that's slightly yellow, so it's only the dark portion you keep. At this point, we're just trying to keep the whole thing intact. I think it adds a little bit of weight, not significant, and then that's from after having been growing in the soil since 2018. And we did end up losing some corms in 2019, and we had some weather, some snow, and then also some health issues in our family that we just weren't able to harvest or maintain. So our production, we harvested just under 4 grams in 2019. So it's not just like you just set it and totally forget it. You have to maintain, really intensive. But we averaged about maybe just under 170 flowers for 1 gram this year. And I think in 2018, it was very similar as well.
So Jonathan, can you just talk about where you sell your saffron product locally or here in Wisconsin?
Yeah, so Evan, that's a great question, because growing this, ideally, I don't want to just do it as a hobby or it's just fun. It is fun, and I do enjoy that benefit of it. We haven't sold initially because we didn't know if we were going to sustain this. Plus, it's really difficult to try to keep up with those prices if you're trying to compete on a local scale. Trying to find that price point has been challenging. So we wanted to research. So at this point, we are selling through Camel Cooperative, which is a military veteran family cooperative that we started in the Fox Valley. And then we're doing direct consumer. And this is meant to be very small income stream for us as a complementary source. And then as we get the processes more refined, we want to be able to have other growers that we collaborate with, ideally other veteran or producers that are close to us, so we can kind of collaborate that way. We're not in the point where we want to sell to any wholesale accounts or anything like that, because it is very labor intensive, and we're trying to command a more premium price because of knowing where it's from. We grew it following organic practices, but part of it is the education, helping people learn about local saffron. And really in Wisconsin, with your program, what you're doing today is super helpful, because when I look at anything else for Wisconsin saffron, I don't find anything. So it's really important, the work that Margaret and the team's doing there, but also your podcast bring awareness so people do know that there's more choices.
Just to give you an idea, we did a survey last year on SaffronNet, and we got about 24% of the people that answered were making between $1,000 and $5,000 from their saffron per year. 12% made over $10,000. And admittedly, that's gross, that's not net. And so obviously it comes down quite a bit. There was at least one grower that was making over 50,000. So there are some large growers now. And so it just shows the potential that's out there. And for saffron, for the saffron market, for the local saffron market to expand, there needs to be, marketing, and some of that is teaching people how to use it. I've been amazed at how many people know what saffron is, but not a lot of people know what to do with it. And so part of a whole marketing program would be to get people educated and to let them know why buying local saffron is important. Saffron is the most adulterated spice in the world. So when you're getting what is labeled as saffron, how much of it is really saffron and how much of it is something else entirely? At least ideally, if you know your producer because they're your neighbor, you're more guaranteed that you're going to get a good quality product.
Sure, sure. So my next question, and I think it's going to be for any one of you three to answer, it's kind of a two-part question. So one, if I understand correctly, is there any regulations or protocols that go into growing saffron just because it can go for human consumption? And then kind of like the second part to that question is, are there any standards to growing it, right? Like if we think about growing potatoes, sometimes producers want a specific size or a specific color. So is there anything along those lines that are a standard in the growing of saffron?
So I can speak to the matter of sort of state regulations, and Arash can talk about some of the quality standards. In Vermont, there are no limitations in terms of people selling saffron. They can sell it in the farmer's market, they can sell it from their home, they can sell it to the restaurateurs directly or to wholesalers. What we've learned, however, is that some states, because of the food safety regulations, they're not allowed to dry saffron in an uninspected food processing area. They have to go to a registered food processing site, and which is quite limiting, I'd have to admit. So the states where that is an issue, it's a hindrance for sure. And so it would be wise for growers to check with their state ag departments to find out what the regulations are, because it really depends on the state, and we haven't had the funding that we would need to be able to really investigate that further.
Sure.
Arash.
About the quality, when you are talking about the color of saffron or having a standard, we technically are talking about chemical components in the saffron. We have three main chemical components in the saffron. They are responsible for the taste, the smell, and the color of saffron: crocin, picrocrocin, and saffronol. So International Organization of Standard, ISO, has a special standard for concentration of those three chemical components, and they categorize different classes of saffron. So when we have higher concentration of those chemical components that I mentioned, that means we actually have a better saffron. But it's a difficult and complicated procedure for growers to assess the quality of their product. So it's the reason we, at the University of Vermont, we are cooperating with the chemistry department to find a better and easy way to assess the quality and categorize our saffron quality, and maybe in the future we will make a protocol for that issue.
Other thing that has been particularly gratifying for me is from the very beginning, when we started and we got a lot of interest among growers, some growers some segments of the agricultural industry tend to be quite competitive. And sometimes growers don't want to share their ideas or their information with other growers. And it's never been like that in the maple syrup industry, I'd have to say. I've always been amazed at how collaborative that industry has been. And I'm happy to say that the same has been true with Saffron so far. And so when you hear Jonathan talk about how he's keeping data on how many flowers he picks and what kind of weight he gets, et cetera, or how he's dealing with weeds or rabbits or whatever, that kind of information is being shared broadly among all the growers on SaffronNet. And it's really lovely to see that people aren't being competitive, they're being collaborative. And to me, the success in the long run of the North American saffron industry is going to depend on everyone working together. Even though I realize, just like Vermont produces the best maple syrup in the world, probably it also produces the best saffron. But despite that, I bet the saffron in Wisconsin could be a close runner-up.
I would venture to say I think that Wisconsin saffron may very well be better than Vermont.
Oh,
So
That's our goal. That's our goal.
But you had a great head start. You have a great team, and I think that's part of the research part of this. The surveys, when people on the SaffronNet get this, it's important that we fill those out, and that anyone else that's participating share that information, because others will use it. They might learn that maybe this isn't something they want to participate in, or maybe they'll try it. But that also helps for funding and understanding how we can learn. There's a lot of resources available through federal funding and things, but making sure that those resources are used to help, especially I think small producers, because you're talking about the different regulations and things. Thankfully, there's a lot of opportunities for direct consumer options or cottage food laws in different states, and those laws all vary. But I think all states really need to look at how can they support small growers or small scale farms, because we lack some of those other resources available to maybe large conglomerate food producers or companies, which they do get a lot of resource in different ways. So if there's creative ways to find and support small growers, and this could be a great complementary crop, because you can't just like all your eggs in one basket. If you're trying to just grow one thing and you're expecting you're going to do really well at it, well, if you diversify with small crops or diversity of different crops and be good at it, and you can produce a crop for your community, that's something to celebrate. And quality food, it brings people together, and just the connectivity of it. Food is great, and I'm just thankful to be a part of that. So I hope in the research everyone else is doing, if we can help encourage some of that research and collaboration, that's awesome. So thank you.
I think it's worth also saying thank you to Arash. He's originally from Iran, and I think we, as North Americans, not as residents of North America, we're lucky to have had the opportunity to learn from the part of the world where more saffron is grown than anywhere else, and we can do a good job of it. We will never be Iran, but it's lovely to be able to learn from him.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Thank you so much. I'm about crying.
Well, you even shared different recipes. So from your own family and, that you use in the workshops, that's incredible to have that. Like, that's just sharing part of your culture. And that's a wonderful thing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Well, as an extension program, I think that this can just build on itself. I think that's how these partnerships happen. If Vermont and Wisconsin can connect and expand this, and then we can work on how to use it and start with recipes and being able to use it correctly and really expand that demand. I think this sounds like a crop that could definitely fit us. And like Jonathan said, a small acreage, sustainable, environmentally friendly, all of those things that we're looking to check check the boxes on in agriculture. Seems like saffron's one of those things to look into. Anything? I'll just go around the horn, or Evan, anything you want. Otherwise, we'll let our guests kind of give a final comment or two, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I have learned a lot in this 45 minutes that we've been chatting, and I like Jerry, I'll retweet what he said. I am thankful that you guys were able to join us, and I hope we can keep the conversation going and continue learning.
So, Margaret, any final thoughts on where we're headed?
Well, we look forward to having future podcasts like this, and we love the fact that people outside of Vermont are interested in what we're doing and can benefit from what we're studying.
Great. Arash, any final comments?
Oh, yeah, sure. Actually, the thing that we forgot to say, saffron is a medicinal plant as well. It has anti-depression, anti-carcinogenic effects. So when we are thinking about that, we see that pharmaceutical companies and market maybe has a potential in this market technically for saffron, US grown saffron. So that was just for growers to be motivated to plant saffron this year.
Yeah, great. And that's a great, I don't want to say a teaser for maybe one of our next segments, but I think the marketing piece of this is
A great
we could spend an hour on doing that.
Right.
I really piqued our interest today. So Jonathan, as our resident Wisconsin farmer, where do you see the potential going with this crop, and how can we support one another to maybe make this take off a little bit?
Yeah, I think, what Arash had said is the medicinal potential aspects of it and the research of it. And I forgot to mention this earlier. One of the reasons why we did start growing it, my wife she suffered from endometriosis for many years and adenomyosis. And that was one of the things that kind of drew us to it, knowing that it can help alleviate some of that, some of the pain for endometriosis sufferers, and some of the health benefits potentially for depression and other things. And I just think it's not only for medicinal, for growing, for farmers, but I think there's a lot more research opportunities here too for what those values can be. And UW-Wisconsin is a huge research school, so maybe they could do more research on it. But for me, we want to just keep this as a small diversified crop. There are some challenges and opportunities with it too, but boy, that research from University of Vermont, it's incredible, great people, and I'm just thankful that I've learned so much from them, and I'm looking forward to helping any way I can. Thank you.
Yeah, and there was a couple of resources I think that were mentioned, Margaret, and we'll put more of these on our podcast website. But those resources, again, you said there's a website or some things that people can go to learn more?
Yep, there's our website, and you'll, I guess, put that on your website, and SaffronNet, which is a free email listserv with over 750 people from all over the US, Europe, and Iran and Afghanistan. So it shows a broad spectrum of individuals, growers, researchers, marketers, everything.
Great. Well, appreciate it. Evan, any final comments?
I think we're good, Jerry.
Appreciate that. Well, again, thank you, Margaret, Arash, and John, for taking your time today on the Cutting Edge podcast. Once again, we will probably be discussing this crop in the future as our guests return, if they're open to that, and this hasn't been too painful for them. So we appreciate your time, and we will talk to you down the road.
Brought to you by the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension.